Alright, so before we get started, one more quick plug here. If you are interested in what kind of other gear that I use, like strings, tuners, stuff like that, you can find some Amazon links in the description. Also, if you shop through those Amazon links, my channel gets a consideration, so to speak, which is also helpful to what I'm doing here with the videos. So again, if you're enjoying the videos and you want to provide some extra support, that is a great way. If you don't like the videos and you don't want to provide extra support, I suspect what you'll probably do is dislike the video and leave some comment along the lines of, "Jack Fossett talks too much, he just likes the sound of his own voice," to which I would respond, "Guilty as charged." Alright, let's talk Gretsch. So, this guitar. A little bit about this guitar just to get started. This is the Gretsch Electromatic 5420t. This is a modern version. It went through a revamp, I want to say, in about 2016. The older versions had kind of the wider headstock that said Electromatic on it. They had different pickups that were like the full-size humbucker Filtertron pickups. And they went through a big revamp again in 2016, and it was sometime around then when Gretsch came out with the Streamliner guitar as the lower end Gretsch model, and then this kind of was bumped up to a middle of the road Gretsch model, which was a really cool idea because for a while there it was like you could either get the Electromatic, which was kind of a little bit more of a lower end, and I'm not trying to put down the old Electromatics for anyone who has them and enjoys them, but this was definitely a step up from them. There was a big gap between those guitars and then jumping up to the higher end Gretches like the reissues and the made in Japan ones, and adding in the Streamliner series and bumping these up, and then they also now have things like the Players editions, which are really cool, which are a higher end one. They've really kind of expanded their line of models and bridged some of those financial gaps. Because one of the things that held me back from getting a Gretsch guitar at first was I wasn't really digging the old Electromatics, and I didn't want to shell out the money for a higher end model not knowing if I would use it or not. Well, this guitar I got a little bit over a year ago, and it was one of the best purchases I have made. I absolutely love this guitar, and it opened up the Gretsch world to me, which I'm now hugely a fan of. I really love Gretsch guitars. I have this guitar, I have a Gretsch 6120 as well as some acoustics, and I just have really fallen in love with Gretsch guitars' style, their sound. I'm not being paid to say this, I just want to say that up front. Did you hear that, Gretsch? I'm not being paid to say this. Not. Like, I could be, being paid to say this. I did a full review of this guitar. I've done several other videos with this guitar. I just really, really like this guitar. This is the Fairlane Blue finish. Comes in a number of different finishes. Having played this guitar for a while now and used it live a number of times and used it in recording, I want to say that one of the things that's cool about this guitar is it has its own unique tone. It's somewhere between a single coil and a humbucker, and then viewed through the Gretsch lens. It's not. It would be way too much of an oversimplification to say it's just between a single coil and a humbucker. It has an evenness to it, a slightly acoustic quality, an evenness and an openness to the response that makes the pickups. They drive very well and they work with effects very well. They don't have a lot of there. It's a weird sort of paradox almost, because I feel like they have inherently a lot of mid-range, but the response doesn't feel like it has a lot of mid-range. So like when you strum with this guitar, it has that open, even sound that's good for strumming, as opposed to something like a humbucker, where if you kind of strum on a fat sounding humbucker, it's a little like, whoa. This one kind of, it doesn't do that. So that gives you a little more free range on dialing in your EQ. I have found that it likes EQ, it likes kind of bass and treble right in the middle, and you can push the mids a little bit. One of the things that's really cool is because it's a hollow body, it kind of self-regulates where it wants some of these frequencies. So you have a good range on these frequencies, and I have not found I've had major problems of feedback playing with it live, which is really cool. However, it will let you know when it's too much, because this is a big, fully hollow body guitar, and when you get a little too much gain or a little too much on the mids or the bass or something, it will start swelling up, and that's kind of. But it's really got some sweet spots right before it hits those points where it just sounds very resonant, harmonic, and musical. So again, I found I like this guitar the best using just kind of like a Fender style amp with bass and treble somewhere around average, right around 5, and then pushing the mids a little bit. Now, as you heard in the intro tones, Gretsch guitars seem to really love delay, and I don't fully understand why, but there's something about the Gretsch sound that just loves delay, whether you're talking about a vintage delay, a modern, crisper delay, whether you're talking about a slapback or something with more spaced out repeats. There's something about them that just loves delay, and I don't know if this is just a psychological thing. It does suit the tone, so I'll say that. So to get started here, let's go on to the neck pickup with a little bit of overdrive and some nice delay, and just show you how you can get a really cool basic overdriven tone that really resonates and the delays stay pretty crisp sounding. For this demo, I'm plugging into the amp next to me, which is a Fender Mustang GTX100, and I'm using that because I want to show you how you can get some real usable tones at a more modest budget. So let's start off with this neck pickup overdriven tone. Now, that's kind of a bluesy sound, and one of the things that I think is really interesting about Gretsch that surprises me is that they're very underplayed in the blues world, and this is something else about Gretsch that I just don't fully understand. I've been involved in hundreds of blues events, whether they were shows that I was playing in, big events with other bands, jams that I was going to, or going to see bands on stage, going to concerts. And I can say with reasonable certainty, there may be one or two that have slipped in there, but I'm 99% sure that the number of Gretsch guitars I've seen played by blues players is a big fat goose egg. I just don't understand why Gretsch guitars aren't really that common in blues, because they seem to me like a perfect blues guitar. They check all the right boxes. They have old Americana vibe. They have a throaty, twangy, that can get aggressive tone, but that retains a lot of character. They perform well. They look great. They just should suit blues. So I am going to do some blues in this, and to start off, I'm going to use a similar tone using a Fender amp and just pull the bass a little and push the reverb a little. No delay on this clip. Using the neck pickup, just check out how this gets a really nice old-fashioned blues tone. Here's this tone. Now, if you want to get a similar tone, but get more of an aggressive blues tone, you can dial it in very similarly, but add in a little bit of overdrive. So here's some more blues with this guitar, just adding in a little bit of overdrive. For another old vintage style tone, one of the easy things you can do is I'm going to take that same kind of blues tone, just a basic Fender clean tone, add some tremolo and a little bit of reverb, and there you've got something kind of inspired by Dwayne Eddy, some of the old classic country rockabilly rockers, before we're getting into the slapback echo territory. But hear how good this guitar sounds on the middle pickup setting, just with some tremolo. Really cool old tone. Now next, as far as the Americana genres go, these guitars can actually be great for jazz as well, and you do see players using them for jazz. It might, I don't know if it's less common or more common, but because it is a big archtop guitar, it does suit jazz quite well. Now, one of the common things to do with that would be to string with flat wounds. So I am going to take a clip from my original demo. When I got this guitar, it was sent to me and it was strung with flat wounds. And before switching over to round wounds, which is what I use, I did shoot a small clip for that review using the flat wounds so that you could hear what it sounds like with flat wounds. So here's a clip that I pulled from that video. Check this out. Now, if you just want some jazzy tones once in a while and aren't really into totally stringing it up with flat wounds and going that route, one of the things you can do is back off the tone a little bit. You don't need to back it off a ton. The important thing is to back off the tone knobs on your amp, and I've talked about this in other videos, but if you back off the tone on your amp down to like in the 3 range on all treble, middle, and bass, even less if you can kind of muster it, that's really how you get a better jazz tone than just rolling the tone off on your guitar, which just makes your guitar sound muffled. It doesn't really get you a good jazz tone. You get that as much by dialing it in the amplifier. So here's playing this guitar now using a jazz tone with the EQ on the amp backed off, the tone knob backed off a little bit on this one, but it has the round wound strings. So here's a pretty passable jazz tone for players who don't want to string it up with flat wounds. Okay, so I mentioned Dwayne Eddy. Let's talk about some kind of classic artist tones that you can get with these guitars. One of the most common ones is probably going to be Brian Setzer. Brian Setzer is one of the most popular, fabulous guitar player who's been around in the Stray Cats and with the Brian Setzer Orchestra, and has used a pretty consistent rig for a lot of the time. It's a Fender Bassman, not a tweed Fender Bassman, but like a blonde Fender Bassman head with 212 cabs, and he loves the Roland Space Echo, as far as I know. Now, the Roland Space Echo is going to give you more of a vintage warbly echo sound, and he's also, certainly utilized the slapback echo among other echoes, like the longer echoes and everything. The slapback echo is really key to the old Gretsch rockabilly sound, or certainly some Brian Setzer type sounds. If you're not familiar with what a slapback echo is, it's a quick echo with very few repeats. So your note goes, but and it gives it this cool old studio that in fact, in the old days, sometimes they'd use it with tape echo machines. Other times they'd use it with tape recording decks and double tracking, which is a whole talk for another time, but it's a really cool vintage sound. So this is a tone inspired by Brian Setzer. It's a model of a Fender Bassman and a model of a Roland Space Echo. I'll do my best to do Brian Setzer some justice here. Check out this really cool Brian Setzer tone. Now, another classic artist who might be kind of overlooked when it comes to Gretsch guitars would be George Harrison. In the early days of the Beatles, George played Gretsch guitars. You can get really cool early Beatles tones with this guitar. Now, when I say you can get early Beatles tones, what I'm saying is you can get tones inspired by. Now, this is not the Dwayne Eddy Gretsch. This is not the Brian Setzer Gretsch. This is a Gretsch guitar, but when you look at kind of the broader sphere of guitar tones, Gretsch kind of exists in its own little subsphere. Now, within that subsphere, there might be a lot of different Gretsch tones, but to most of the broader sphere of tone, you look on the outside in and go, oh, it's a Gretsch tone. And I'm not trying to say that Gretches all sound the same, because they definitely don't. But what I am saying is that more often than you think, you can get a passable Gretsch tone with a lot of different Gretsch guitars. So for this tone, I'm going to plug into a Vox model run. On the cleaner side, a little tiny bit of grit to it. Cleaner, more trebly side, it's a model of an AC30. And this is kind of just a crude look at Beatles tones again, but I've added a compressor in front. If you're looking for a Beatles tone, a Vox amp with a compressor is a great place to start. So check out how this can get some really cool tones inspired by early Beatles and basically the 60s British invasion in general. Check this out. Now, a lot of players, believe it or not, have actually used Gretsch guitars for some heavier, some higher gain tones, but just some generally great rock rhythm tones in general. In fact, 3 players who used Gretches, well, Malcolm Young is the first one to mention, may he rest in peace. Malcolm Young of AC/DC was famous for using Gretsch guitars, and even though he had his unique solid body, he also would use bigger Gretsch hollow bodies at times. Other players who would use big Gretsch hollow bodies, including the White Falcon, would be Pete Townsend and Neil Young. None of these players were really known for having small tone. It's big arena rock, powerful tone with some gain and some grit and everything. The one thing you need to be careful of with this guitar is if you use big, heavy gain sounds, you do need to be concerned about, not concerned about, but you do need to be aware about feedback. Remember, those players played on great big stages. Well, when you're big, wide out in the open, you can get away with a lot more gain on a guitar like this than you can in a smaller rock club. So be aware of the stage that you're on and how that might affect it. But it will do snarling rock tones really well. So for this next one, I'm going to use a model of a 70s Marshall and just play some cool, heavier rock rhythm with this guitar. Check it out. Lastly, a lot of modern indie players are kind of getting into Gretsch guitars and everything, and so I'm going to use a similar gainy tone for this, but add in some more delay and everything, and just hear how, you know, even not necessarily changing the tone that much, but just the style and adding some delay, you can really make it assimilate to a more modern guitar sound. Check this out. thanks for tuning in and sticking with me through this video. Let us know in the comments if you have this guitar and how do you like to dial it in, because I'm trying to help you find some cool ways to dial it in, but this is by no means a complete lexicon of all the tones that this guitar can do. These are some tones that I've found that I've been inspired by. So feel free to leave in the comments if you have this guitar, how do you dial it in? What kind of sounds do you get with it? Let us know below. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and follow the links if you want to help out the channel where you can check out some music. I'm Jack Fossett. We'll see you next time.